Today we are with Professor Henry Mintzberg, specialist in leadership, management, and strategy. Thank you very much, Professor Mintzberg, for being with us.
Pleasure to be here.
You've researched and wrote on many issues. One of them is on management.
Right.
And you compare management with a symphony orchestra and different roles there. Can you share those stories or parables?
Yeah, well, management's loaded with myths. I mean, we're just loaded with myths of all kinds. And one of the myths is the manager sitting on the podium conducting the orchestra, and you go like this, and the accountants all play, and you go like this, and marketing comes in, and then sales comes in, and everything's glorious, except it's not like that at all. And a fellow named Len Sales, who studied American middle managers, said, it's like an orchestra conductor, all right, but during rehearsals, not during performance, where everything's going wrong, and the stagehands are making noise, and people aren't playing right, and everything's going wrong. So the myths die very strong, but managers like to think of themselves as very grand. Some managers do anyway.
And what would be the right myth, the right comparison of what a manager is?
Well, the orchestra conducting during rehearsal is not a bad idea. I like the phrase calculated chaos,
Okay.
controlled disorder. Managerial work is not organized very well because you never know what's going to happen next. So managerial work has to be very adaptable, very flexible. You have an expression in Brazil, don't you, about finding the way around, and that's how do you say it in Portuguese?
Jeito.
Yeah, and managing is very much like that. Brazilians probably make very good managers because of that.
Would you distinguish management from leadership, and if so, how?
No. Would you like to hear more? I think it's a dangerous distinction.
Why?
Because managers who don't lead, nobody wants a manager who doesn't lead. A manager who doesn't lead there's no inspiration, there's no feeling, there's no oomph. A leader who doesn't manage doesn't know what's going on. They're disconnected. And we have this idea of grand leaders who sit up on top of these orchestra pedestals and sort of lead that way. And that's not leadership. That's disconnection. That's detachment. So I believe that leadership and management have to be combined.
And how do you develop leadership abilities and managerial abilities?
You don't.
Okay.
At least you don't create leaders in a classroom. You don't create managers in a classroom. You simply don't do that. And anybody who believes that is dangerous. Anybody who comes out of the Harvard Business School with an MBA should have a skull and crossbones, the pirate
Yes.
on their head saying, warning, not prepared to manage. Because there's nothing you can do in a classroom to turn someone into a manager or into a leader. On the Harvard Business School MBA website, the word leader or leadership appears 55 times. It's a sham. It's a sham. They don't create leaders. George Bush went through the Harvard Business School. We don't think use that. But what
He got quite far. He became president of the United States.
Partly thanks to his Harvard MBA. Absolutely, absolutely. But lots of managers got far, and their financial institutions are collapsing under them. Wagoner got far running General Motors, and that's collapsing around him. So there's another Harvard MBA. So there's no shortage of.
We'll come back to the.
You see, what Harvard does is it gives you the opportunity to move ahead. You have the old boys network. You have the status. You're fast talking. You learn how to make an argument in a case study discussion, and you learn how to make that argument based on 20 pages read before about a company you know nothing about besides those 20 pages. What kind of a manager or leader does that make? What you can do is take people who are leaders, who are managers, and you bring them into the classroom to work with each other and reflect with each other on their own experience and learn from their own experience. So you don't turn them into leaders or managers. You take those managerial skills and experience and leadership experience and you use it to enhance their understanding of themselves.
But you just said that you don't do that in a classroom, and not you're describing a classroom environment.
You can do that in a classroom. You can't create a manager or a leader in a classroom, but you can take people who are leaders and managers and do wonderful things for them in the classroom by letting them learn from their own experience.
So you need previous leaders to go into the classroom.
Established leaders, yeah.
So how does anyone become a leader? Or is it for everyone to be a leader? What are the characteristics to be a leader in the first place?
First of all, there's no such a thing as a leader for everything. So leadership works in the time, in the context, in the situation. So sometimes the right person appears at the right time and exhibits leadership capability. I mean they're capable of leading in other contexts. So leadership is not a generic thing. Is leadership born or made? Leadership is born and made. It's born in the sense that not everybody is born to be a leader or manager for sure. But through your personal experience and your challenges in life and the difficulties you face, kinds of jobs you have, you learn your way with the potential from birth, you learn your way into leadership and management capabilities. So, and you do that through experience on the job. And then we can come in as academics in a university setting or management development programs and enhance and enable those people to enhance their capabilities.
In your experience, what would be the 2 or 3 key characteristics of leaders?
I'm going to give you a particular answer to that because I'm writing a book now called Managing, and the last chapter is called Managing Effectively, and I open the chapter with what are the qualities of the effective manager / leader.
Okay, so that's an advance on your new book.
A little bit of an advance on my new book, and I basically say, well, find a list. There are lots of lists, and I find one list, and I list the 6 or 8 characteristics on that list, because every list, you can't have a list of 40 characteristics.
No.
So you have a list of 6 or 8 characteristics. So I list them, and then I say, oh, wait a minute, where's intelligence on this list? Where's energy on this list? Surely effective managers are intelligent. Surely they have energy. So we have to add a couple more. And I said, basically, we have to put all the lists together. So I took all the lists I could find, and I came up with 38 qualities that you must have to be an effective manager. And I added one more, tall. Because no list has tall, but that's the only one for which we have empirical evidence, that on average, leaders and managers are taller on average than other people.
Jack Welch is not tall, or
no,
Napoleon
wasn't tall, but on average. So I facetiously add tall to the list. And basically I say, if you want to be an effective manager, you have to be all 38 of these characteristics. But Superman wouldn't even qualify. I mean, kryptonite, if kryptonite was on the list, Superman wouldn't qualify. So I conclude that effective managers and leaders are flawed. Everybody is flawed. But in the job, they're not fatally flawed.
Okay.
So this idea of finding the magic formula for what makes people, it's a question of what the job is and what their characteristics are and whether their flaws are not fatal. If you want to find out what somebody's flaws are, marry them or work for them. And you'll find out very quickly what their flaws are. But if you're a mature human being, you also realize that in most cases you can live with those people and even admire them, even though they're flawed, because we're all flawed. So there's no magic formula for... I have my favorite characteristics.
Come on, go for those.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just...
Empathy, or,
thoughtfulness. Thoughtfulness I put high on my list. Empathy, a sort of an understanding of people, a concern, an ability to deal with people. On the other hand, there are some miserable SOBs who are effective in certain conditions. People who are thoughtless, I'm not sure there's too many effective managers who are thoughtless. George Bush is thoughtless, but I don't think he was a huge success. So Welch is very smart, and he thinks for himself. And I think really good managers and leaders think for themselves. They don't follow the crowd. They don't buy subprime mortgages because everybody's buying subprime mortgages. They're in touch. I think they know what's going on. I think they don't micromanage. They just know what's going on. There's a difference between micromanaging and knowing what's going on.
What about Machiavelli's principles, of people that really use and abuse power?
And can be very successful for a time. But we have an amazing ability to tie ourselves in knots. What's his name in Africa? What's his name? The guy who's just screwing up something awful in, I can't think of his name, just north of South Africa. I mean, the man is a monster. The man, or Idi Amin, these people are monsters. But they hold power through Machiavellian kinds of things. Other people maneuver very effectively through Machiavellian kinds of things. But the leaders in the world who I admire today are people like Kofi Annan when he was running the UN, or Merkel in Germany. Very quiet, thoughtful, low-key, not these big rah-rah hero kind of stuff. I think that's just a huge problem. Even Obama, I think, is...
I was going to ask, how do you compare Obama with George Bush and tie that into their education and their upbringing?
Aside from height, they're probably both quite tall. At least Obama's quite tall. I think Bush is fairly tall, too,
Yeah.
from what I can gather. Aside from that, I think that's wins, other than having 2 ears and 1 nose. So I can't compare Obama with George Bush. Obama's a totally thoughtful guy, surrounded, from what I can gather at a distance, surrounded by very well-chosen people. If you had to decide this election campaign on one criterion alone, which is a very important criterion, which is who has the ability to manage the government, to deal with the complexities of government between McCain and Obama, it's no contest. Obama ran an amazingly brilliant campaign with very good people around him. McCain screwed up left and right, every which way. Just showed no ability. I have some admiration for McCain, but showed no ability whatsoever to manage.
What the admiration for McCain comes from? Where does it come from?
Well, I think he's an honest guy. I also think, other than during this election campaign, he thinks for himself. He has the courage to take his own stance. I don't often or always agree with his own stance, but at least he had the courage to take some stance on his own. So I think the man is a decent human being. I think he was in the wrong place. I think it was a bad choice for him to run for the Republicans.
And what's your assessment of the world crisis from a management point of view?
The world crisis is a management crisis.
Okay.
It's a fundamentally management crisis.
Why?
Well, Joseph Stiglitz just said at the conference a few minutes ago that it's a financial crisis. But behind the financial crisis is a management crisis, because people haven't been managing their organizations. Number one, they were selling these, what he called toxic mortgages, these subprime mortgages, just selling them in order to create sales out of nothing, and push, very short term, no sense of long-term need and so on. And number two, the financial institutions that bought this junk were not managing their businesses. They were not managing their businesses, and their people weren't managing their businesses. How could anybody who looked at those mortgages and saw what was behind them possibly buy them? It was...
Why? Because that's an interesting question. No one wants to shoot oneself in the foot. So there must be a reason in the whole system that created this perverse incentive.
Everybody was doing it, so therefore you do it. Everybody's doing it, therefore an MBA is a good thing. I think an MBA is a bad thing. I think an MBA creates it's great for learning business, it's wrong for learning management, the way they're conventionally designed. But everybody's doing it, therefore you have to do it. Very conformist, tremendously conformist attitude, and that pervades the practice of management in the United States today. Very conformist. And if you look at the people who you bring to this conference, like the guy who built up the Grameen Bank or whatever, these are people who think for themselves. These are not people following the crowds.
They break paradigms.
They break paradigms. Say, look, an economist. The role of an economist is to create categories, and the role of a strategist is to destroy categories. So economists create SIC codes and so on to have all the industries nice and neat, and the strategists come along and screw it all up by combining industries and merging things together. And that's, if you look at something like, people say, what's an example of a good business strategy?
Yeah.
I say IKEA. IKEA is amazing. Look at what IKEA did. They went into the furniture market, and they just grabbed the huge part of the market with a totally original strategy. Very unusual, very creative, very interesting, very appealing. You know how long it took them to develop that business model?
No.
A Swedish friend tells me 15 years. 15 years. You know how they came up with packaged furniture, knockdown furniture? They were trying to get a table into a car. Or truck, I can't remember. They were trying to get, and they couldn't get it in, so they took the legs off to get it in. And they said, gee, wow, if we can't get it in, what about our customers? And that's where the idea of knockdown furniture came from. You learn from experience. It's not genius. But if a manager's sitting in an office reading financial statements, he doesn't think of things like that.
Okay. You said the MBA is not the way to learn management. if you were to advise a 20-year-old, 22-year-old that just graduated from college and wants to get into management, what should he do?
Well, I do this all the time. I do this all the time. They never, ever take my advice. Because
that's right, once again, for all the people that are watching us all over Latin America, what advice would you give them to have a successful career, break the educational paradigms of the MBAs and the like?
Basically, I say, if you want to be a manager, earn your stripes. Earn your managerial stripes. Work in an industry that you like. Work your way up. Prove that you have managerial capabilities. Then when you're in a managerial position, come to us. We have wonderful programs for you to learn from the experience you're getting on the job. But you're not going to learn management at the Harvard Business School or Wharton or McGill or anywhere else in a young person's MBA. Now, EMBAs, for older people, take the right people. But usually they just replicate. The Wharton, your own school, I have to say this, but Wharton boasts on its website that you get the same thing in the EMBA that you get in the MBA. We don't shortchange you. You get the same thing. And I'm saying, you're telling me that you take a 22-year-old person, or you take a 35 or 40-year-old person in a managerial job, and you can do no more with them than you do with 22-year-olds with no experience at all? I would be ashamed to say that on my website.
It seems that their view is, we throw you stuff. So we throw you the same stuff, whether you are 25 or 40.
We fill you up with management knowledge. Except it's not management knowledge, it's business knowledge. They do very well. You want to learn about marketing, finance, accounting, those things, terrific. Wharton's great, Harvard's great. You really learn about those things. What you learn about management is distorted.
You've seen a lot of U.S. presidents. Which one would you spot out as a leader and a good manager?
Roosevelt was a very shrewd, clever president, I think, really knew what was going on. His ability to get information was apparently phenomenal, just pulling it out of people, knowing what's going on. So Roosevelt was a very interesting example. I think Kofi Annan in the United Nations, very interesting example. A guy came out of the UN, was respected in the UN. You know, if you
what did he accomplish?
What did he accomplish? I think he stabilized a lot of things in the UN. And I think if the American administrations were half thoughtful, they would have worked with him instead of...
You say that the way we name things have an impact on how we treat them. And an example of that is the name of pedestrian freight that was used in the old railways. Human resource appears to be a very strong name for people, for human beings. What are the implications of using that name?
That you fire them left and right and don't think twice about it. People are resources, so you don't need them, you throw them out the door. I'm not a human resource. I think it's an insult to call me. I don't call you a human resource. Don't call me a human resource. I'm a human being. You're a human being. We're people. So people say, well, what are we going to call our department? I say, call it the people department. Call it the human being department. I mean, human resource is a terrible term. Just think about it. We're resource, or human assets, or human capital. It's this economic domination of our thinking that's horrible.
If you called it people department, of human being department, what would be the two things that you would do differently within that department? You would still have to pay the salaries. You would still have to train people and try to...
I'll give you one thing because it's big. It's a big one. I think the most effective way you could change organizations dramatically is by, and I don't usually have magic bullet solutions, but this one would make a huge difference, is when you select managers, whether it's first-line supervisors or chief executives or anybody else, you listen to the voice of the people who know them best, namely the ones who have worked for them. How often do we choose managers or choose chief executives and even just listen? I'm not saying elect them. I'm saying listen to the voices of the people who worked for them, who were managed by them, who were led by them, and hear what they have to say. When Bolton was proposed as the UN ambassador for the United Nations, and there was so much resistance in Congress, somebody described him as a kiss up and kick down sort of guy. We're loaded with kiss up and kick down managers. We're loaded with managers who can suck up to, to more senior people and impress more senior people, but are nasty with the people working for them. These are the worst kinds of managers. They're the worst kinds of managers. We're loaded with those people. Chainsaw Al Dunlap and all these kind of famous, horrible people. So listen to the voice of the people who know the candidates best. You know, there's one famous company that you know well, probably everybody listening knows well, leader in its field for decades. Absolutely top respected leader in its field for decades. And it chooses its chief executive for a 3-year term, through a closed vote of its senior management.
Okay. Which company is this?
It elects its chief executive through a closed vote of its senior managers. Can't guess?
No.
It's called McKinsey & Company.
Ah, yeah. Okay.
Did they ever recommend that to any of their clients?
Does it work?
Works for McKinsey.
Okay.
If it works for McKinsey, did they ever recommend it to anybody else?
Because I think if you're advising of listening to the people who work for a leader to be promoted, versus what probably is done today, that is measure the results of that leader.
Oh boy.
Would results obtained versus satisfaction of the people working for them, which one of the two criteria?
Measuring results measuring results is destroying American management, because you can much more easily measure short-term results than long-term results.
Okay.
So people are getting promoted based on short-term results. That's the whole subprime mortgage mess, is that people are just selling these mortgages quick in the hell of the future. 2-3 years, I'm gone, with my bonuses, so who cares? I have a whole section in my new book on how you assess managerial effectiveness. Good luck. If somebody goes into a job as sales manager and increases sales by 40% in 2 years, is he an effective or she an effective manager? Well, number one, maybe the market grew by 60%, therefore they were ineffective. Maybe somebody else could have grown it by 90%. I mean, how do you measure these things? We have simple measures. Sure, you can have measures, but they're very simplistic, and you have to be very careful about those kinds of measures. So measurement is not the solution. I have one word for measurement. Okay. It's called Enron.
Okay.
Enron did lots of measuring.
So we are flawed in the measurement system, and I agree that creates perverse incentives for all the managers. What would be a characteristic of the 21st century corporation, of a successful 21st century corporation? One is to listen to their people.
Just common sense.
Common sense.
Just common sense. Truly serving their customers and not pretending to serve their customers while making lots of money. Not viewing their customers as dollar signs, but viewing their customers as the most important thing is to serve those customers and satisfy those customers. Respecting the employees, building a sense of community. For me, the word communityship should go along with leadership all the time. We shouldn't talk about leadership ever without talking about communityship, because it's about community, it's about people working together and pulling together. But if every time the stock drops a few points, you fire them, not because you're losing money, but because you're not making as much money as you did last year, therefore you fire 3,000 people. It's like throwing bones to the financial analysts. You're killing your company by getting rid of the heart and soul of the company because you didn't quite make your numbers.
Well, then we have a big challenge in the 21st century, is to realign the incentives with the true creation of value, as you say, in the community and in the business. Thank you very much, Dr. Mintzberg.